Hello everybody, welcome to the Wine with Jimmy channel. I am your host Jimmy Smith and thank you so much for stopping by. This is a wine educational channel designed with you in mind, the wine student, to help you through your WSET courses all the way up to the diploma. And that's what we're looking at here on this shorter video. This is on the very long and intensive wine production unit called the D1 of the WSET Diploma Level 4. And we are looking here at the approaches to wine making. So this is going to be part 1 of 4, looking at conventional and modern wine making. Now, as always, if you have any comments or questions or concerns, you can get in touch with me here at Wine with Jimmy by getting in touch with the social media that you see at the bottom of every slide, or you can do it via the comments section below this video. Make sure that you do click subscribe so you get notifications of the weekly updates that we have on all of these educational videos. You can also get in touch direct with the www.winewithjimmy.com website, where my wonderful e-learning portal can be found, which is a wonderful resource for those of you studying your WSET, where you can gain access to flashcards, revision sessions, short written answer questions, multiple choice questions, and many more exclusive video content. So let's have a look at what we're going through today. So now hopefully you have looked at viticulture at this point, which is our first unit of the wine production. So just as there are a number of approaches to managing a vineyard and viticultural philosophies or approaches, there are also different philosophies or approaches in wine making as well. The certain type of approach that a winemaker will take will very much influence their winemaking options and, of course, their choices. So, for example, looking at things like biodynamic, organic, or natural, for example. So these presentations, these 4 presentations that we will go through, will introduce the approaches of things like conventional, modern winemaking, organic winemaking, biodynamic, and natural winemaking. So let's have a look at those 4 just here. So part 1, of course, is available now here as free content on the wonderful world of YouTube. Then part 2 and 3 and 4 are only available on my e-learning portal. That's at www.winewithjimmy.com. So that's organic, biodynamic, which will be a sizable section because of my interests in the subject, and also natural winemaking down there at the bottom. So we will go through all of this. The aim really of conventional and modern winemaking is to produce stable wines which will reliably show fruity character and, of course, have no discernible faults, or what people may see as certain types of faults. So we're aiming to make quite a clean and stable wine through this technique. Now, this approach, conventional modern winemaking, is used across all types of styles, quality levels, and of course prices. So you'll find this at the high end as well as the lowest end. It really depends, of course, on what the winemaker, what he or she is aiming to get as the final product. Okay, so let's have a look at certain things that we will overview here in terms of what would be deemed as conventional and modern winemaking. So let's have a look at our first slide just here. So, of course, we are going to be looking at techniques which are aiming to get the cleanest and stable wine. So we are looking to really have quite significant levels of control over the winemaking. So quite a lot of intervention. Whereas we go down the list towards natural winemaking throughout these presentations, that's when we're looking at less and less intervention, or what we would maybe institute as minimal intervention. Okay, so here we're talking first of all in conventional and modern winemaking around temperature control. Things, for example, like cold soaking or cold maceration, where equipment is brought in to really store the grapes that have just been crushed before their primary fermentation, before their first fermentation. Okay, so cold soaking, but the ability to really control fermentation temperatures with particular outcomes in mind. So things like producing an exceptionally fruity style. So, for example, with white wine fermentations, bringing the temperature down to the lower end of the temperature spectrum, potentially 12 to 15 degrees Celsius, to really help to maintain the brightness and the fresh fruit compounds. But also the temperature control during the maturation phase too. So we are gaining compounds at a slower amount, but a more gentle, controlled environment. So temperature control throughout, really pre-fermentation, during fermentation, post-fermentation, and that includes maturation as well. Okay. Next up is, of course, the utilization of additives and also something we call processing aids. So there are many additives and processing aids that we can have. Food items often, of course, littered with additives and, of course, processing aids. So let's go through what these exactly are. So first of all, in the top left, you will see there, sugar. So sugar, of course, is important because it is added to increase potential alcohol, but also it can be added just to increase sweetness of the final product. And this is something which is called, certainly when you add sugar into the must to increase potential alcohol, we call that a form of enrichment, and specifically chaptalization, something which was introduced from Jean-Antoine Chaptal, who was the French Minister of Agriculture, who was a fantastic alchemist. He was a real polymath, a real scientist, and he made use of the excessive use of sugarcane production in the French overseas territories because they were not making, or there was not enough rum being produced, so there was an overproduction of sugar, and he put it to use for sweetening the musts of wine, increasing the potential alcohols. So, of course, this has been around for quite some time to increase those potential alcohol levels. Also, down at the bottom there, SO2. So the addition of the gas, sulfur dioxide, to protect the wine as an antiseptic and an antioxidant is used widely across winemaking, something we'll touch on, of course, later on. Also, on the right-hand side, I pulled this picture off the internet, which I think is quite fascinating. The use of cultured yeasts. So not natural yeasts, which would be considered a part of the natural environment or the terroir where those grapes come from, but in fact adding cultured yeasts which are purchased, they'll be purchased from industry and then utilized for the fermentation. And here you'll see there's an active dry wine yeast from Red Star called Montrachet. And interesting, there are some very, let's say, slightly far-fetched names of some of these yeast strains for cultured yeasts, but also things like fining agents as well. So here is a picture in the middle of the egg white, and this is the coagulant of egg white we're looking at, which is called albumen, which is used for fining. And of course, this is going to give a little bit to the wine as well. Of course, makes it non-friendly for vegans, for example, and it's an additive that they really need to know about. So there are, of course, many things, and there are other things as well, of course, things like acidification, and in fact, taking away certain aspects as well. So yes, lots of things that can be talked about, and we will discuss it in much greater detail as we go through the main crux of the presentation. And then something we call manipulations. Of course, we mentioned earlier that really conventional and modern winemaking is really having a lot of control over the process. And that will encompass things like manipulations. So manipulations could be from the form of pressing, for example, simple pressing, things like pneumatic presses, which are common in wine regions and around the world in sort of medium to large scale wineries, and certainly those that can afford the initial investment. So, of course, these are ways of really manipulating what we can get out of the grapes. Things like filtration, which will be discussed later as well, and even further advanced technology. So things such as reverse osmosis. And here we've got some membranes and reverse of osmosis little membranes that we'll see in this picture. So this process is a form of cross flow filtration. It's quite a mouthful, that removes a flavorless permeate of alcohol and water, which can be distilled to remove the alcohol. The permeate is then blended back to recreate the wine. This is the most high-tech and common option that we have available, and the equipment could be rented or bought, but of course it can be generally quite costly. And this, of course, is a way of removing excessive alcohol. So that is possible, and it's a way, of course, manipulating your final product, but wouldn't necessarily be that natural. Okay, so the decision of manipulations as well comes next. So just because manipulations are possible or additives are available, it does not necessarily mean that they are, of course, used in every case. It really is a depending factor on the philosophy of the winemaker. So the options employed by the winemaking team will be dictated by many factors that we'll look at on the left-hand side. So things like the style, the price point that is required, the health and the ripeness of the grapes, things like the beliefs, the philosophy of the winemaker, like I mentioned. Some examples for you. So sterile filtering of wines with residual sugar. So wines that are making potentially things like off-dry styles, demi-sec, moelleux, and even sweeter examples. These styles, it's usually desirable to utilize sterile filtering, because the sugar will, of course, make it a more breeding environment for microbial spoilage. So it's important to eliminate that threat. So that's one option. And also, by contrast, a number of producers of premium dry wines will choose not to filter. And that is because they believe that, of course, applying a filter and passing a wine through it could remove some texture and or flavor aroma from the wine. And I've put a picture up here of the very outspoken Northern Rhone grape grower and winemaker Michel Chapoutier, who also has productions around the world in places like Alsace and also the south of France. Very outspoken, the man that mentioned that the TDN compound in aging Rieslings, that note of petrol kerosene, is actually a fault. But in terms of what we're talking about in manipulations here, a famous phrase that I'm going to leave you on, which I think is quite a funny one, Michel Chapoutier said that filtering a wine is like making love with a condom on. So do look it up if you don't believe me, but it is a true statement that he said. And of course, you can read into that as you wish. But yes, that would come in to the decision and the philosophy of the winemaker at that bottom of the slide. So that is our quick look there at conventional and modern winemaking. Join me in the next session, please, when we looking at organic winemaking, which is going to be a little bit of a longer section. As always, please do pop your comments in the comment section below this video on YouTube, or you can get in touch with me via the social media that you see at the bottom of every slide. Mine is the far left, my personal one, Wine with Jimmy. Also, please visit the e-learning portal at www.winewithjimmy, where you can also get in contact with us. If you do find yourself in the United Kingdom, you're passing through, or maybe you're coming for a longer stay, then please do come and see us. Here in London, we have bars and schools, so come and see me for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Thank you very, very much. See you soon.